Pretty good? Yeah. All right, go ahead and enter Ryan.
Blair Automotive, Ryan Blair, marker.
You know, a lot of people aren't going to believe this, but I am not mechanically inclined. I mean, I've always been ADHD, but, I got diagnosed when I was a kid.
I think he considers himself like the black sheep of the family.
You couldn't just be middle of the pack or average. You had to excel.
We have doctors, we have lawyers, we have literal rocket scientists.
It was a hard burden, and then having that direct competition from my identical twin brother. Ryan's always been a lot. No one could really tell him what to do. My parents couldn't really tell him what to do. I've always struggled in school. I was always, bottom of my class, but I always tested off the charts.
When I knew him, he was just a young, fresh kid. He had to go through some hard times.
He was a technician that kind of fell into that because he flunked out of college.
There's this underlying potential that I just always knew I had that was just like incredibly powerful, like just below the surface. And I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I did know that I had to realize that potential.
Tell me what this car is.
So this is a 1982 Mercedes 300 turbo diesel. And this was my first car, and my grandfather had it and gave it to me. I don't even know if it'll run. It's a classic. Battery's dead. This was the car that I picked up my wife in for our very first date. And I drove it all the way from College Station to Austin. And I picked her up at her dorm, and then it promptly died. And then me figuring out how to keep this car running is like kind of what inspired me to drop out of college and go become a technician.
I spent a lot of time in those years really getting a sense of the consequences of not pushing towards what I know I'm capable of. That's when I made the decision I was going to go to technical school.
To study?
Yeah, I was going to study how to work on cars. If you had known Ryan up until this point, you'd be like, these are two completely different things. He's always been capable. Just he never was doing the right things that I guess combined his passion and his drive in one place. And once that clicked, it was game over. Time compressed, a very specific goal. I'm very focused. I execute on another level. I got a perfect 4.0 on my GPA. I got the Dave Hill Award, which is kind of like the valedictorian award. I had options. I could have gone to Porsche. I could have gone to BMW, but Audi was my passion. This is where I started my career as a technician. A lot of long nights, a lot of pain.
He was a hard worker. He would stay later than he really needed to, and he was really trying to turn as many hours as he could.
It was not this immediate success. The first several years at the dealership were incredibly challenging. Most people wash out in the first couple of years of turning wrenches at a dealership, and for good reason. There's a lot of alpha dogs, there's not a lot of support, a lot of help. Everyone expects you to figure it out. And that I'm about to get married and I don't have a house and all this kind of stuff. And I just was like, we need to reconnect with the potential.
His vision is crystal clear, but I can't get him to open mail. From the outside looking in, it looks like laziness or, you don't have your priorities in order or anything like that. But he does not have a neurotypical brain. And when I fully embraced that and owned that, it was a way to support him so that he can really capitalize on his superpower.
There are times in your life where you're putting in everything that you have. You're reaching through the veil to try to reach your potential, and you're right there. And when you're in the moment, when you're in the action, when you're doing the thing, Like that's when you feel like the most alive. I realized that when I have that kind of alignment, almost anything I set myself to is not only possible, but it's inevitable.
And so you became the #1 technician in the country.
I did. Yeah. I won the Twin Cup Challenge, which is a competition for every Audi technician in the country. And then I was averaging about 500 hours a month in production, which is something like 2.5 times to 3 times average. Almost overnight, I became, a multiple 6-figure earner at a pretty young age. I got a house, got a yard for the dog. We just have this huge shift in our lives. I'm at the top of the mountain again. I'm at the finish line again. Hey, this is a familiar place to be. And what I was terrified of is, am I gonna start languishing now because I don't have a clear new direction to go?
And then he got this harebrained idea. I think I could do this on my own.
So we're coming up on it right now, and it looked a lot like this. It looked like a junkyard, right? And so I made the decision that while I'm at the top of my game and at the top of my career, it's time to throw it all away and start an auto repair shop. I had a friend who had a little storage unit here to store his cars. And I was like, okay, how much are you paying for that? And I figured out okay, it was like $700 a month. And I was like, okay, I'll put a lift in there and I'll start the shop in there.
I'll never forget his very first customer. Ryan was into it and realized that he didn't have any of the right tools or the parts, the factory things that he needed. We ended up that very first job outsourcing it back to the dealership. So we actually lost money on our first customer.
And so I would just get massively overwhelmed with everything, financial issues, dealing with parts, invoices, just so disorganized and just ADHD as hell. He called me and he's like, hey, so there's a lot of paperwork. I have to talk to people. I don't really know how to organize some of this stuff. I helped build our website. I helped create these little trifolds that we then just went out and put on cars. Let's say you're a customer of mine. This gate is totally locked. You call me on the cell. I'm wrenching in the shop over here. So I gotta run the half mile around here, and then I gotta tell the person the code, and then they enter in the code, the gate finally opens, and I say, okay, follow me. And I run all the way to my shop while they're driving behind me. I literally started a shop in Alcatraz. That's how it started, right? It was rough. It was really rough. Eventually, I started hiring on some of my buddies from the dealership.
We'd work together. He would work front and he'd work in the shop. And then we'd hire some guys we knew from the dealer, kind of kicked off the dealer there.
We were out there sweating in 120 degrees together, fixing cars.
But then it kept growing.
In my full height here, I own 214, I owned 219, I had 224, 225. And then before you know it, we were on a trajectory that was just kind of exploding. And that's when we moved into what you see here. I found commercial warehouse spaces because I had this idea that we could make this huge shop. I did what I had to do to get in front of the landlord and convince him that I could somehow pay the rent, even though I really couldn't. And so I just was borrowing money left and right. And that's buying equipment, that's getting into the lease, that's doing the renovation. It was all of these things added up.
I had a lot of concerns back then on money, but at the time I had a great career and great job. And, if this all crashes and burns, I still have some way to hold us together.
We knew that we had all of this momentum. We had this huge shop. Really, you're flying, you're flying, you're flying. The hard part about flying is not knowing when you're flying or you're falling. At a certain point, they feel the same until you hit the ground. And that's sort of what happened. Even though we doubled, maybe even tripled in business, we were still losing a significant amount of money every month. And before I knew it, I was over $1 million in debt.
In a matter of 6 months, we had gone from being set up pretty well to literally having lost everything. I had sold my house, I had sold my car, and the final straw was when I took my wife's 401k to make a payroll.
And I was like, oh. That was also when I saw him like, oh shit, I'm not sure I have this all figured out.
I mean, it's by far the lowest moment. Because if you've ever been in that position, it feels like an unbearable burden. And what I found in that moment was almost like this awareness. And it was like, well, okay, but I'm not dead. Okay, well then I guess it can't kill me, right? So I could sit here having a panic attack under my desk in the fetal position, or I can stand up and I can face it. And that's when I was like, you know what? We've pulled this magic trick off before. We've got to set the vision. We've got to unleash this potential. And that's when I got really, really humble, and I found a mentor, and I found a community of other like-minded shop owners.
When I saw Ryan actually doing the hard things, making some decisions that probably felt embarrassing or a break to his ego, was when I was like, okay, he's really serious.
It's just like diagnosing a car. I had to start looking at business as a series of systems. It was leadership, it was personal development, it was understanding my finances, it was really understanding a P&L. Now that I understand the system, now I can diagnose the different pieces of it. Once we got the systems implemented, even though we were still in debt, even though we were behind, I knew that we were on the way out.
I watched it grow from a distance, and I continued to practice law for about 5 years.
And I decided to bring him on board to help run the shop.
We looked at the numbers. I was like, you can't afford me. And he's like, but look what it can do. I showed up, everything started clicking. Within 6 months, the store had doubled in revenue.
We immediately get up to about 2 million. And then within a couple of years, we're up to 5 million, and then 6, and then 7, and then almost 8 million, and becoming, the largest independent European repair shop in the country. My wife comes into the picture because she's been running sales teams for multi-billion-dollar SaaS companies for decades.
I am someone who can execute on projects and ideas. He's got his next big dreams and next big goals, and I'm game.
Today, we're a large corporate platform, and the kinds of things that, most people feel like were insurmountable, we just took those as the way forward. That foundation is what's going to allow us to achieve our vision of growing to 100 locations, to really realize that potential.